Desensitization. Like, I was just thinking about it and wondering what you had to say about that, by the way. Like, have you thought about it too? You know, I have had it as a topic at random when I'm just sitting with myself and thinking about, random things, and desensitization is a topic I've thought about. Why? What's up? Well, exactly how do we end up experiencing forms of desensitization when it comes to things in our life experiences that we normalize eventually as everyday experiences? Exactly. Well, it's kind of almost what you just said. Basically, when somebody re-experiences a reinforced experience so many times, a person eventually becomes desensitized to the experience of it because of the repetition behind the repeated experience. This could represent an offense that can be warranted or unwarranted depending upon the situation itself, or it could just be an action, or it could be um, a thing that gets put in front of you daily that you eventually normalize as being something that's a daily thing to just expect. To go as far as even saying that, for example, if you're in an environment where you're regularly bullied, eventually you normalize that as being something that is something you adapt to where you become desensitized to the actual harm of the experience because of how reinforced it's been. Or another example would be when you're watching updates on different news updates around things that involve another person's belief system that may not align with yours, but somehow seems to go in the direction of attempting to dictate how you live your life personally, if it affects your life in a certain manner or way, and when that's reinforced consistently, or if you experience a type of information regularly that revolves around some sort of suffering or death, or just informing people of something to be fearing, or experiencing fear mongering from the information. I mean, and you experience that regularly, that's something a person could eventually get desensitized from as well, to where they begin to normalize that as something to now expect. Which, in a sense, could trigger a nervous system into a burnout eventually because of how consistent the nervous system gets triggered into a sense of survival mode, a fight or flight, or freeze, depending upon exactly the person, the situation, and the experience, obviously. What's having you bring it up? Well, the thing is that these days I notice that most folks are experiencing being desensitized from things as simple as human decency, all the way down to something as big as, uh, let's say, rights being rewritten, or uh, people's choice to choose, depending on the environment they're in, or just on a society or economic level, for instance. There's levels to me noticing how people are desensitized to these things, depending on what it is and what hemisphere they're on in regards to that. Where there's some reacting to specific things while others are not, and vice versa. And it gets me wondering exactly, I'm noticing the split of, I want to say, disassociation with the people who are reacting and the people who are not. And it gets me just wondering, you know, is there a correlation? To be honest, I don't know. If anything, what I do know is that usually when there's a split where things get disassociated between a group of people that are reacting and a group of people who are not reacting, usually a lot of the time, it does involve a sense of being desensitized to something because either they have been re-exposed consistently to something that relates to whatever the other group of people are reacting to, that the group that isn't reacting is so burnt out from reacting that they're just now in a state of being desensitized. They have no more space to, how do people say, not care is probably the best term to use. Because they've had to already survive environments or experiences that they used to react to the same way as the group that is reacting is reacting. So, personally, from a position of perspective, I think that desensitization to specific things roots from the fact that there has been way too many reinforced repeated experiences or offenses, or whether it's warranted or unwarranted, repeated or maybe exposures to different forms of distractions or things displayed in terms of watching and observing for personal entertainment purposes or actually just for informational purposes, has put a person who is desensitized into a state of not having the capacity anymore to have a reaction that results in the group that is reacting. So, if anything, when you get folks up here worrying about how much people don't care about certain things, they're right. They probably don't. And it's probably for good reason. I personally have a perspective that when a person gets desensitized to a certain point where they're burnt out to not react to certain things anymore or a lot of things anymore, despite the downfall of not being connected to the emotional regulation of being able to have the appropriate reaction to certain things that actually do need a response, a person has reached a point where now they're preserving themselves to know when it's time to react and when to not, which is actually a game changer if they're utilizing that position wisely, because they know that it's not about a position of reacting anymore, it's about a position of perspective. Is this something worth paying attention to or is it not? And they're also in a position of accepting, can I control this? Or is this something where I just need to preserve my energy and see where I can protect myself and keep it moving? Because they've reached a point where it's not about reacting anymore. It's about responding and knowing how to respond. And oftentimes that can also be perceived as negative when people only see it as being desensitized. While the people reacting have their own rooted belief system and how they believe things should be responded, you got these people who are in a state of, okay, well, I can't control this, so what am I going to do to protect myself from this if I need to protect myself from it? And then I need to move accordingly. How do I do that? They are more in tune with listening to themselves than the emotional reaction that usually used to be a combustive reaction for them. That I guess I would say Group A, who is reacting, is doing. You following me? Yeah, I think so. So what you're saying is people that are desensitized actually might potentially have a higher rate of emotional intelligence than the ones who are reactive? In summary, is that what you're trying to tell me? Yes and no. Yes, because they are able to stay in a state of regulating what is priority and what is not, and what needs immediate reaction to making a decision, what does not. They're able to filter out and isolate what is important a lot better than someone who's more reactive. Versus someone who is reactive, they're regulating their emotions through reacting to something because they do not accept something, which is a form of standing up for themselves, which can present as a form of emotional intelligence if they know how to regulate and use that through their dialogue while they are reacting, the choice that they're choosing to react as, if that makes any sense. Neither side is necessarily wrong, but neither side has really, like, how do I say? Neither side is necessarily wrong, but neither side is necessarily in a ballpark of being, oh, this is exactly how I'm supposed to be. Like, every side has its own ball in their court to do as they wish with, if that makes any sense. So, dependent upon what area you are at personally, it's going to determine how much energy you're going to pour into it, if you want to pour any energy into it at all, if it's a priority to you, and if you do react to it, do you have the awareness to regulate yourself enough to know how to effectively communicate without wasting your energy through unregulated reactions that won't really result in anything but just more reaction. Interesting. So emotional intelligence can also be shown through a reactive state as long as it's regulated through a sense of self-awareness. But emotional intelligence can also be shown through the area of being desensitized, because the fact the person is able to prioritize and filter out exactly what's priority and what's not, and therefore they can have a more calmer state of mind to know what they need to focus on and what they cannot. Which in a sense helps them decide what they need to care about and what they don't. Allows them to focus in and narrow down exactly what's focused on more than on a broader standpoint and perspective. I see that. Oh my. Oh my. I'm now like kind of applying this to a bunch of different variables, and I'm just kind of wrapping my head around the fact that everything is just connected to how a person is choosing to just exist. Based on their own personal experiences and how they navigate them at that point. And that means that nobody should be giving anybody crap for what side of the spectrum they're on, as long as they understand the responsibilities of what that entails when they choose which direction they want to go in terms of reaction or non-reaction, regardless whether they're desensitized or not. At least that's what I'm thinking. Yeah, I could get on board with that. That makes sense. It makes a lot of sense, actually.